Hey everybody, it's Charles, your hobby hero. Today we're coming at you with our final color review, and that is going to be Amber. But before we get started, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button down in the bottom corner. I do appreciate it. I do put out regular content about the hobbies I love the most. So we're going to jump into the Amber set review. I will say right now, I think that Amber has a very strong role-playing opportunity in here. I don't feel like it's a deck that has a lot of paths as far as how you want to build the deck, but I do think it is very, very good at what it does. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump in and take a look at what that is. All right, guys, we're back on Dreamborn Ink, looking at our final color of ink, which is Amber. We have them sorted from lowest cost to highest cost. We'll be reviewing them for both limited and constructed, starting with Hey the Boat Snack. 1 drop, he is inkable for 1/2, 1 lore generation with support. Whenever he quests, he can add his strength to another chosen character. I think this guy's perfectly fine and limited. He is inkable. He produces 1 lore for 1, which is not bad. Has some opportunities for favorable trades with the other 1/1s that are getting played, and can create some favorable trades by adding his strength to another character before they challenge as well. I think he's perfectly fine and limited. In constructed play, you can probably use him as one of the 1-drops. One of the problems or strengths of Amber is that it is a very effective kind of rush lore deck, so he could be a perfectly suitable 1-drop in a deck that is full of other 1-drops to help kind of create some advantage out there. Not at the top of my list for 1-drops for that deck, but certainly doable, especially being inkable. I don't think it would make much of a difference one way or another, but you will have a plethora of 1-drop options to choose from, and he's probably far enough down the list he won't see many constructed decks. On the other hand, you do have Lilo here. She's a 1-drop uninkable. She's a 1/1 2 lore generator. She is the same rarity and card as Maleficent that we saw in Amethyst. This card is extremely one-dimensional. It is really only good in a very dedicated lore rush deck, but it is very good in that sense. It must be paired with ways to protect it, such as bodyguard characters, as it is as fragile as it gets. And since it can't be inked, it can't really be a situational play. It really needs to be down on the board, turning sideways to quest to produce 2 lore for you. In limited, you're probably not going to be able to protect her, and as such, she's probably not very good unless you are able to get enough support to back her up and keep her alive. In constructed, though, again, the Amber is very one-dimensional, and she fits that one-dimensional perfect. If you're playing Amber, you're most likely playing 4 copies of her, because I think that's just the only viable deck that they have right now. Similar with Stitch here, he is inkable for a 2/2 for 1. He is obviously the 1-drop Stitch that is the ideal target for the Rockstar Stitch. He is going to be in pretty much every Amber deck as its definitive 1-drop, just again because that deck is so one-dimensional. In limited, he is your 2/2 for 1, perfectly fine. I think he's perfectly fine in limited, especially if you can get the Rockstar Stitch to go with him. In constructed, again, if you're playing Amber, this guy's probably a 4 in your deck because he's just the best 1-drop due to that ability to shift up into that bigger Stitch. And we have Timon here, the Grub Rustler, 1/2 inkable for 1 lore generation with the ability Taste Like Chicken. When you play this character, you may remove up to 1 damage from the chosen character. Now, he does have some synergy being a 1-drop in this kind of aggro deck. However, as I mentioned, there are a lot of good 1-drops, and this one really doesn't make the cut. In limited, he's probably fine. Again, a 1-drop that's inkable that produces 1 lore is usually good enough to be in any limited deck, but in constructed, you're just going to have better options than playing him, even if he can create some favorable exchanges with the damage removal. In a lot of decks that are playing Amber, they're also going to be playing Rapunzel, and Rapunzel is going to want that damage on there, not having Timon heal it without the card draw. Control Your Temper is a 1-drop inkable action. Chosen character gets -2 strength this turn. This ability is very, very good. I really like it. We're going to see some characters with this ability on them that I think are big staples in both formats. Unfortunately, a one-time use action with this ability is just not good. If you're forced to play it, it is inkable and can create some situations in Limited where it can be a blowout of a card. So I think it may see some fringe play in Limited, but it would not be a card I would highly prioritize. And Constructed, there's no reason for this card to be in your deck. There are just better options. Healing Glow, another action for 1. Remove up to 2 damage from a chosen character. Similar, this effect is really not that good. The fact that it's inkable is all right, but this effect is not what you want. You want to be playing another body for 1. And if you need a healing effect, you want to be playing Rapunzel for the healing effect. I don't think it's good in Limited. I don't think it's Constructed. I couldn't Constructed. I don't think you should play this card. Next, we have Dinglehopper, 1-drop inkable item with Straighten Your Hair. You can exhaust it or exert it rather to remove up to 1 damage from a chosen character. In Limited, it's probably fine. Reoccurring healing is not terrible in the Limited format. It is inkable and most times will end up in your inkwell, so definitely not prioritize it any more so than probably just an inkable card in your deck. In Constructed, though, again, we've already established if you're doing any healing in Amber, you want it to be done by Rapunzel, not by a Dinglehopper. You want to be playing another Stitch, you want to play a Lilo, or another 1-drop in that spot. You don't want to be playing an item with a bunch of guys who really are usually too small to carry damage for very long anyways. And then we have LeFou. He's a 2-drop inkable. He is a 1 strength, 2 willpower, 2 lore generator with the ability Loyal. If you have a character named Gaston in play, you pay 1 less to play this character. I don't imagine a scenario where you play this guy in the same deck that you do play the Gaston, at least not currently, but a 2 lore generator for 2 for the aggro lore decks is not bad. In Limited, you absolutely play this guy. 2 lore generators at 2 are bonkers in the Limited format. You really just want to be curving out into them as much as possible. His trade ability is not great, having only that 1 strength. So you will usually need to try and protect him. He's usually going to die and leave the person who challenged him behind. So just keep that in mind. But again, 2 lore generation for 2, not too shabby. Then you have Minnie Mouse over here, 2 lore generator, 2 inkable, 2/3, 1 lore generator. For Limited, again, when you have these slightly overstated characters on curve, very good for Limited. At 2, she allows you to challenge into favorably just about every 1-drop and a good number of 2-drops that your opponents will be playing. Very solid body, being a 2/3 on turn 2. Now in Constructed format, she really just doesn't do enough. Again, for your aggro lore generating deck, the fact that she only generates 1 lore is just not the value that you want to see in your 2-drop spot. And then we have Sebastian over here. We have a 2-drop inkable 2/2 for 1 with Singer 4. Not a huge fan of this guy. He is understated for your 2-drops. For Limited, again, he's inkable, so again, he can still make the cut and probably not affect the overall performance of the deck. For Constructed, really the only thing I see him kind of sneaking into is if you're playing an Amber Amethyst list, because the Singer 4 does allow him to sing Friends on the Other Side. Otherwise, Singer 4 is really kind of random. All the songs we have right now are on those odd numbers above that. So you have 3s and 5s. I don't think we have any 4 songs at all yet. Now, this could change in the future. He could be a bigger role player in the future if we have a song that he allows you to play a turn early on turn 3 that can really shift. But as of right now, I don't think he's Constructed viable and really just fringe playable and Limited. Then we have Simba here. Simba is a 2-drop bodyguard, 2/3, 1 lore generator. Bodyguard allows him to come into play exerted, and while exerted, if anybody's getting challenged, it has to be challenged on the bodyguards first. Now, this guy is absolutely bonkers for Limited. He forces unfavorable trades. He can protect your lower lore generators or your more damaged characters that you use to trade favorably the turn before. The fact that he can enter the battlefield and have an immediate effect by exerting himself is also very nice. And constructed, he is a linchpin for the aggressive decks that Amber are looking to play, as he comes in behind your 1-drop and protects them from being kind of swung into by your opponent. As a 2/3, like we mentioned for Mini, his body is going to allow him to trade favorably for most people, usually them having to wait till they have their 3 or 4 drops before they can challenge in and then potentially go after the characters that are behind him. Big fan of this guy in both limited and constructed. Be Our Guest, a 2-drop inkable song that allows you to look at the top 4 cards of your deck. You may reveal a character card and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. I really do like this card in limited. It replaces itself for a pretty low cost, allowing you to search for and hopefully get the most impactful card in your deck. In constructed, if it finds the right home, I absolutely think this card can be a role player, if not now, in future sets. Like I said, if Amber wasn't so one-dimensional right now, I think this card would have a much bigger spot in the meta, just because it allows a lot of things to happen. It allows you to dig very aggressively for your combo pieces if you're playing a combo deck. Again, I just think Amber is so locked into aggressive decks right now that you really don't want to spend your 2 turn to play this card. And I don't think you really want to exert really anybody other than maybe a Simba to sing this song, and probably doesn't make the cut in most lists because of that. We've got Lantern here next. This 2-drop item that is not inkable. With Birthday Lights, you can exert it. You pay 1 less for the next character you play this turn. Lantern's probably going to be that key engine in the aggro decks from Amber. This allows you to get your Rockstar Stitch down on turn 3. You play the Stitch turn 1, this turn 2, and Rockstar Stitch using this effect to reduce a shift cost to 3. It really makes that deck lightning fast. Now, the fact that it is uninkable is a bit of a drawback, especially if you draw multiples of this card. That Amber Amethyst deck especially runs a very high number of uninkable cards. This does allow you to kind of cheat on that a little bit, as it, even though it is not inkable, it is producing an ink for characters basically every turn going from there, so you can kind of double up on your turn 2. I like this card a lot. Again, I think it is going to be around for a while just because it facilitates those aggro matches that much. For limited, it's probably not going to do much other than kind of be a 1-turn ramp spell. If you're playing this on turn 2, you're obviously going to be 1 turn ahead for inking characters from that point on. However, it's not inkable, which makes it kind of a bad top deck late in the game as well. Then we have Ariel in the 3-drop spot. She is a super rare. She is inkable. She's a 2/3 with 1 lore generation. She's a singer 5, which means she can basically sing everything in the game minus be prepared. And she has the ability musical debut. When you play this character, look at the top 4 cards of your deck. You may reveal a song card and put it into your hand. Put the rest to the bottom of your deck in any order. Now, her stats are pretty unimpressive for a 3-drop. However, she does replace herself most times if she's in the right deck by getting a song, and then being able to sing it the following turn is quite nice as well. However, I just don't think she's got a home in constructed. And now in limited, the card advantage she generates by replacing herself in her hand is probably just good enough. 2/3 body for 3 is not going to win you any games. However, it's just anything that generates any kind of card advantage in a limited format is probably just good enough to be in your deck. So I'd say she's good in any limited deck. You're going to want, obviously, songs for her to target in there, but there are plenty common and uncommon songs that are worth playing, as again, Be Our Guest, we just mentioned a little bit before, and similar ones that she's going to be able to fetch out in those formats. All right, then we've got Maximus here. We were talking about the Control Your Anger earlier. This is a character that's got it built in. He's a 3-drop inkable, 3/3, 1 lore generator with that horse kick. It gives a character -2 strength when it comes into play. Very big fan of this card. It is a huge, huge, huge bomb in limited. 3/3 for 3 is already nice. 1 lore generation's a little under what we would like, but the fact that he can come in and just create an extremely favorable trade, especially on curve, he is almost guaranteed going to have a target that is going to now die and do no damage in return. Love this card. Play as many copies of it as you can in a limited format. In constructed format, I don't dislike him either. I think he's got the right stats for the aggro decks that are coming in. It allows you to kind of turn the tables on your opponent who may be trying to build up a board to get past your Simba and be more aggressive on that turn instead and take out their potential attackers for the following turn. So I think he's good enough for constructed, but definitely an all-star and limited. Talking about All-Stars and Limited, we've got Mickey Mouse here. He is your 3-drop inkable 3/3 2 lore generator. In Limited, again, those on-curve 2 lore generators are going to be fantastic. At 3/3, he can protect himself decently well. He's going to trade evenly, mostly in his cost, but it's not going to allow your opponent to challenge up to him with their smaller characters without usually being a 2-for-1. So very nice card. Definitely play this card in your Limited decks. In your constructed decks, probably just too slow. You've got an ample number of options to generate 2 lore a little bit cheaper. And some of the colors, you're even getting into your 3 lore generators and very soon after this, with green getting there on, I think, turn 4. So he doesn't really fit the curve of a lore generation deck in constructed. However, he is a target if you are running any of the Mickey Mouse shift cards. You can get that in there as well. Mr. Shmee, 3-drop, inkable, 2/5, 1 lore generator, vanilla character. In constructed, this guy is probably just not going to see play unless something comes in with some interactions with the pirate crew. Now, Unlimited 2/5 does create some interesting trade dynamics. A lot of the 1-drops are 2 toughness characters that only have 1 or 2 strength. So he essentially can be a 3-for-1 for the early game if you get him down on curves. I think he's fine to play in Limited. Definitely not somebody I would prioritize super high, but an all-around good card, inkable, huge willpower, and enough strength to trade favorably with the early game. Then we have Just in Time, an action, 3-drop, uninkable. You may play a character with cost 5 or less for free. Now, for Limited, I don't think this card is playable. You just don't have enough control over it. You'd need multiple copies of Just in Time because you really need to play it on 3 to get any value out of this card. And it's not inkable, so if you don't draw it on 3, you can't get value out of it somewhere else. And then you've got to have really a 5-drop in your hand to really maximize the value of playing this card. So I don't think it's playable in Limited. In constructed, it's kind of a tricky card because in order to maximize its value, you're probably going to want to run 4 of them in your deck. And you're really only going to get any value out of it probably twice, unless you're really just being greedy and trying to cheat your curve. And you're trying to maximize only putting 3 ink into your inkwell, but still having access to like 5-drop characters. Now on 3, playing this and then dropping like a Mad Hatter or a Maximus is really, really strong. Unfortunately, top decking this card late is a killer, and having it clogged up in your hand and not being able to ink it's also pretty bad. We could see some combo potential with this in the future. Right now, it's a card that I'm staying away from, though. Part of your world, we have a 3-drop uninkable song. Return a character card from your discard to your hand. In Limited, this is probably fine to play if you've got like a big win condition type card in your deck. If you've got some really aggressive mid-range card or a really big top-end card that your opponent has to get rid of or else you just win, you know, something like a Mother Gothel or a Dr. Facilier. Like, this card's probably fine as it can be your second copy of that card if they manage to deal with it once. Other than that, I probably wouldn't prioritize this card or even play it if I didn't have something that impactful possibly in the deck. In constructed, you have this effect on a body down here that we'll see here a little bit in Hades. I think if you want this effect, he's the better play, and I don't think you want to run 2 uninkable copies of the same effect. So probably a card that I would pass on in both formats, minus a few limited instances in a limited format. Ursula's Shell Necklace, a 3-drop uninkable item. Whenever you play a song, you may pay 1 ink to draw a card. I don't think this is playable at all in Limited. The chances of you having enough impactful songs to even include in a deck to make this card worth a spot is pretty low. In Constructed, I'm not a huge fan of this card either. I don't particularly think Amber has a ton of value songs. And even pairing it with a color that may have a ton of valuable cards, it's just too hard to generate a lot of value with this. Now, could we see some kind of weird song combo deck emerge in the future? Possibly. But right now, I don't think this card is playable in either Constructed or Limited. We got Ariel on Human Legs. She's a 4-drop. She is inkable. She's a 3/4 2-lore generator with the ability, that's the negative ability, she can't sing songs. Makes sense. It's thematic. I think with a negative like that, they could have been a little bit more favorable with her on her stats. I think she's fine for Limited. Her stats are big enough. She does generate 2 lore. I think it's perfectly fine to include in a Limited deck. In Constructed, you just have better options at 4, and you're not going to want to run this, especially since if you're playing an aggro deck, you're in Amethyst. She may be the turning point is the fact that you cannot sing Friends on the Other Side. Again, you just have better options. There's really no reason to play her in Constructed. Probably fine to be in Limited, but definitely wouldn't emphasize taking her. Similar over here, we have Cinderella. She's a 4-drop. She's inkable. She's a 2/5 2-lore generator. Singer 5. With the ability Wonderful Dream, you can exert her to remove up to 3 damage from the chosen princess character. If it wasn't a princess character, this card actually may be viable. Again, in Limited, same as before. She's at 4, has decent enough body and 2 lore generation. The other stuff is just kind of bonus. That's probably not going to impact much of anything, but it's there in case it ever is useful. Definitely fine in Limited. In Constructed, she just really doesn't do anything right now. If there was a Moana deck that became viable, you probably play this character. But right now, again, I just think if you're playing Amber, Moana is not the path you're going. We got Hades next, a 4-drop, uninkable 3/2 1-lore generator. When you play this character, return a character card from your discard to your hand. This Hades is the only villain other than the large Hades that we will see later in Amber. His regrowth effect is nice, even at the expense of not being inkable. I think in Limited, you absolutely play this guy. Decent strength, and to bring a character back from the discard pile that you've already seen value of is a hit. If you can get multiples of them too, you can just kind of keep chaining them back and forth, which is very nice, and in Limited, very, very hard to deal with. In Constructed, I think this guy's going to find a home. I'm currently playing him in my Amber list. He's not an all-star by any means, but does allow for some different plays. I don't know that he'll end up staying in the list. He's probably my least favorite card that's still in the list, but I think he's got a home somewhere. And then obviously, if you ever want to try to build the bigger Hades deck, you really have to have this guy as a 4 of in that deck. Wish he was inkable, but he is what he is. I think, again, Limited, definitely. I think Constructed, he'll find a home somewhere. Prince Philip, another uninkable 4-drop, 3/3. He is a 2-lore generator. When this character challenges and is banished, you may banish the challenged character. So you can swing into somebody any size, really. If they banish him, he gets to banish them back. So, they've got their Maleficent out there. You can take their Maleficent out with a 4 cost character. I think in Limited, this effect is fine. You do find bigger vanilla characters in Limited, like your Svens or your Beast, Mufasa, stuff like that he can trade very favorably with because of his ability. And he is a 2-lore generator at that. In Constructed, I think you just have better options versus this pseudo removal spell. Your opponent's going to have better ways to deal with him and not being taken advantage of. So I don't know that he'll find a spot in Constructed, but in Limited, I think he's perfectly fine. We got Pumbaa up next, a 4-drop. He's a 3/5 1-lore generating vanilla. I'm not a huge fan of him in limited because at 4, he's only generating 1 lore. He's not trading super favorably with only 3 strength. You know, I think you probably will have better options. He's inkable and generates lore and doesn't have a negative drawback, so you can definitely play him. But he's not going to be at the top of your list of cards to keep in the deck. For Constructed, I absolutely don't think he is playable. I don't think there's any reason to play him at 4. You just have much better options in color, and whatever other color you'll be playing will have a better substitute for this in your 4-drop spot. All right, now we've got Rapunzel here. Now, Rapunzel was in my list of format-defining legendaries that are in this set. I think she is one of the most impactful cards in this color of ink. At 4 and inkable, she is a 1/5 2 lore generator, so nothing special there other than she'd be hard to remove with like direct damage spells like Fire the Cannons and Smash. But she's got the ability Gleam and Glow. When you play this character, remove up to 3 damage from one of your characters. Draw a card for each 1 damage removed this way. Now, this is usually going to draw you 2 cards. When I've played it, that's kind of been the average. But even playing this, to draw 1 card, heal the damage, and have replaced itself in your hand is great. 2 lore generator at 4 is not terrible, especially with the ability to draw when it's coming in. Very, very nice card. I think you're going to play this in anything that you can get your hands on it. Obviously, being a legendary, playing it in limited is going to be challenging, as you just won't have very many options to do so. But I think you always play this card. It's inkable at the very worst, and at the very best, a heal 3, draw 3, which is pretty crazy. And in Constructed, I think this card will be a big reason people build Amber decks. She allows you to refill your hand when you're going aggressive. You can challenge with your Maximus bodyguard and draw to heal him back up afterwards. If you haven't hit your Stitch engine yet, she kind of bridges that gap for that Stitch engine. I really, really do like this card. I think she will see a lot of play, and that's why I had her on my format defining list. Hakuna Matata's up next. 4-drop inkable action. It is a song. Remove up to 3 damage from each of your characters. This card I originally thought had some potential. Once I started playing the game, I realized it really has none. I would not play this in limited or Constructed. The odds of you getting even 3 damage healed from this is just very low. Your opponents generally aren't going to leave a bunch of damage across the board sitting on your characters. The one exception might be the turn they play a giant Tinkerbell, because they can't finish it off that turn, but are probably going to kill everybody the following turn. And I just don't think that's worth an inclusion in any deck, limited or otherwise. The fact that it's inkable really doesn't change my mind on that. You Have Forgotten Me, another action here. It is a 4-drop inkable action. Each opponent chooses and discards 2 cards. Now, this action does technically create card advantage, and card advantage in this game is very valuable. However, that 1 card advantage comes at the expense of tempo and comes at the expense of being a horrible late game top deck. Because most times, late game, your opponents both have 0 cards in your hand, or maybe 1 card in your hand, and this is not a card you want to see. As such, I would not play this card. The fact that the worst case scenario is being inkable doesn't really warrant a spot for inclusion for the few times that it really may be an all-star. You really only want to play this if you already have kind of a board advantage and your opponent's down to like 2 or 3 cards in their hand. And even then, I think I'd just rather play another character to really emphasize that board advantage. Again, very matchup dependent. I'm sure somebody in the comment section will let me know how they completely blew the doors off of somebody with this card. But I feel like if they're being honest, this card more often than not is going straight to the ring zone. We got Goofy up next. 5-drop inkable 3/6 1 lore generation with Bodyguard and ability and 2/4T. When you play this character, you may remove up to 2 damage from each of your Musketeer characters. Similar to Hakuna Matata, I really thought this healing effect could be super relevant. However, characters just don't hang around, again, with damage on them. So if you're going to challenge a character, usually you finish it off that turn. And therefore, this ability is really not that good. In general, pretty underwhelmed with the Musketeers. I was hoping we would see just like a generic Musketeer to kind of fill in as a 4th Musketeer for that deck. Unfortunately, we just got the 3, and I just don't think there's a deck there right now, but there's no cap on what they can do with future development in the Musketeers. But for right now, I don't think he's playable in Constructed. And Limited, it's questionable. 5 drop for 1 lore generator is pretty bad. In the uncommon spot, you can get plenty of them and kind of stack them up, and could make a pretty hard wall to get through for your opponents. It's probably fine to play, again, just because it's inkable, but not where I would focus. On the other hand, we have a Bodyguard right here, Maximus, in the super rare spot. He's a 5 drop, inkable 4/5, 1 lore generation. So about the same stats. We moved, power and toughness around a little bit. He's got Bodyguard. He's got Bodyguard. This guy's got support, however, which does make a big difference. This guy is going to come down. He can pretty much tank the same hits this guy can tank, but he can dish out more damage and trade more favorably in the kind of cards that'll be challenging by turn 5. And this support ability allows you to take your 1 drops and start swinging in for 5 or 6 damage to your opponent's characters while he stays back and blocks the rest of the characters that are around there. Really makes this guy a valuable card at kind of the top end for a lot of those aggro decks to kind of drop in on turn 5 or 4, whatever turn you get him down on, and protecting all of those cards while you go off and hopefully quest for the win. I think you play this guy in either one of the 2 formats. You're never going to be upset when you resolve this character, outside of your opponent just having the tempo removal spell for him right off the top. Brings us to Moana. She's a 5 drop, inkable, 1/6/3 lore generator with the ability We Can Fix It. Whenever this character quests, you may ready your other princess characters. They cannot quest for the rest of this turn. Now, no other princess characters can quest for the rest of the turn, whether they were untapped by her or not. So just make sure you use all your princesses to their fullest abilities before you use Moana's ability, because they will not be able to quest after her ability is used. Now, this character is perfectly fine for Limited. She's not going to trade very favorably, though she is going to be hard for them to kill quickly. She's a 3 lore generator, which is very nice in Limited format, and she is inkable. There will be some interactions with like your princesses, like Mickey, some Cinderella, some other cards that are perfectly fine in a Limited format, where she'll be able to ready them, and you'll be able to get a second use potentially out of them for the turn. So I think she's good in that regard. Perfectly suitable for Limited play. Now, in Constructed, I know there's been a lot of people who have tried to make this princess deck work. The fact that the princesses, for the most part, especially the ones in her color, aren't particularly spectacular, leaves a lot to be desired for any of the builds that I have seen. I'm not saying she won't eventually find a home. We're obviously going to continue to get princess characters going forward, but right now she just doesn't do much. There's not any princesses that I really care to get readied, and there's not a ton of princesses out there that are aggressive, I guess, because of that. If you saw earlier, most of them have like 1 or 2 strength. So while it may fit thematically, it doesn't make me really want to ready them all to challenge, and readying them all just to save them for the next turn probably just could be playing better cards at that point. We got Stitch Rockstar next. This is the big shift, or the big Stitch we were talking about. 6 drop, inkable, 3/5/3 lore generator with a shift of 4, which means you can pay 4, and any Stitch you have in play becomes this Stitch. It's got the ability Adoring Fans. Whenever you play a character with cost 2 or less, you may exert them to draw a card. That allows some pretty nutty turns with this guy where you just play a card, draw a card, play a card, draw a card, play a card, draw a card. You have your Simba, which draws a card and then taps so that his bodyguard is active off of his ability. Just an all-around great draw engine. The fact that he generates 3 lore is also great. This card is perfectly fine and limited, even if you have no other Stitches to shift off of. At 6, good enough body and 3 lore generations, just going to be good enough to take it home most games. If you get to draw any extra cards off of it, that's perfectly fine. Now in Constructed, this guy is absolutely a build-around card and phenomenal in that Constructed deck. I think this is going to be a card, if you see an Amber deck being played, you can probably assume that this guy is in there. We have the big Stitch here at the Secret Rare. Now, I think I had listed him as situational on my tier list for legendaries. He is a 7-drop, which is actually really hard to get to for a lot of the Amber decks that are out there. He is inkable, though. He is 4/8, which is a big body and 2 lore generation. The ability Ohana, when you play this character, if you have 2 or more other characters in play, you may draw 2 cards. You almost always will with an Amber deck. So paying 7 for the stats and draw 2 cards is not bad. If you get it off, it's going to feel really good. I think it's going to be very hard to resolve this in a lot of the Amber decks that are out there, and as such is why it's in my situational category for the legendary list. And then our last guy here, this is Hades. He is 8-drop, uninkable, 6/7 monster stats. He's only got 1 lore generation. However, he's got the ability Sinister Plot. This character gets +1 lore generation for each other villain character you have in play. With the shift 6, so you can get this guy down and quest with him on turn 6. When I first saw this card spoiled, super excited. One of the first decks I wanted to build, and then when the full set was spoiled and I looked at all the villains in Amber, and it was him and him. You have this Hades and the little Hades, and you have to take the little Hades out of play if you want to shift on this, which means you have to pair him with another color to get your villains. If you pair him with Amethyst, which I believe has the highest number of playable villains, you are playing a late game deck that has access to no removal. I don't like that at all. And if you play him in Sapphire, may have the next highest, gives you access to 2 removal spells in the other Hades and let it go. But again, you're playing subpar villains at that point in time, and you're really not going to get a ton of lore generation out of this guy when he comes into play. In all likelihood, it's just unfortunate. I think he's a really powerful card. I think he's unfortunately been nerfed by design of the rest of the colors that we have options to. I don't think you can play him in Constructed at all at this point in time because of that. And in Limited, he's certainly too expensive and not inkable, with way too conditional of an effect to play in Limited. Even if you get the smaller Hades, I just don't think, even at 6, this is going to be an effect you want to play. You're opening yourself up for 2-for-1s by shifting him onto them, and probably at best going to be a 2, possibly a 3 lore generator with just kind of a big body. All right, so there you guys have it. That is my Amber review. Let me know down in the comment section below what you guys think of Amber Set 1. And until next time, guys, Hobby Hero out.